The countdown is on then after 24 hours of on-track pre-season testing taking place in Bahrain for the Formula One 2021 season. With the first race only 2 weeks away, we still have plenty of questions to ask about the teams and whether the defending champions Mercedes can fend off the challenges of Red Bull Racing. Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. Today we'll be analysing the results of the last 3 days of pre-season testing. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today are broadcast journalist Louis Edwards.
Hello.
Engineering student Owain Medford.
Hello.
And motorsport podcaster Philip Mathews.
Hello.
Hello. So, before we get on with the testing analysis, we at Grid Talk obviously would just like to take a moment to pay our respects to legendary F1 commentator Murray Walker, the voice of Formula One, and of course, send our love to his family. Phil, as the oldest member of today's show, I'm sure there are memorable. I'm sure there are many memorable Murray moments that you can recollect.
Well, yeah, I was mentioning it to everybody. Like, it's not even a Formula One. But I love touring cars racing too, and the '92 British Touring Car Championship finale at Silverstone is an iconic race. It's still talked about all these years. Tim Harvey has been beating that horse to death ever since 1992. You know, you think about, of course, Damon Hill, the emotion that Murray had watching Damon Hill win the world championship, of course, being able to announce his father, Graham Hill, or think about other British drivers, even announcing Martin Brundle, and then Martin Brundle becoming his whatever compatriot in the booth. There's something about that, and all the other British drivers that came along through the time. Of course, Nigel and him had a great relationship, and they played well together. And I mean, there was just the passion that he had for the sport. To me, I reference for American and for New Jersey and all the thing. For me, he reminds me of the great Chris Economaki. They called him the Dean of American Motorsports journalism. And the two of them, their voice is iconic. What they would say was iconic. Sure, you'd have Murrayisms. He'd make, but the point is, it was Murray. And it was genuine, and he had a passion. And there's something these days that lacks in most announcers. Most announcers, I think, maybe try too hard. Crofty might be an example of that. But he was, from the moment he started, it doesn't matter. He could literally read the dictionary, and I think he would make it seem like it is the most interesting thing that's ever happened in that particular time. So we have lost a great man. We've lost a great broadcasting legend and hero, but I think he's having fun up there with some of his friends that he's been missing for a while.
Absolutely. And as we kind of mentioned before, me, Owain and Louis started watching F1 a bit after, his tenure as the legend, finished. But Owain, Louis, anything that you want to add to Phil's comments?
So my memories of Murray is like when I very started picking up the F1 games, so F1 99 and F1 2000, they actually would have commentary over the games. So yeah, so anything you did during the race would be commentated by Murray Walker, and it was something that I actually quite miss in these sort of modern F1 games. But no, it's anytime you go off into the gravel, he's into the kitty litter. It's yeah, and sort of, when Sky show like classic races and like go back and watch any classic races, and you hear sort of Murray Walker's commentary, you just understand just how iconic it is and how iconic it was, at the time. And I think he'll be truly missed.
And Owain?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't I don't have the experience that Louis or Phil do, but the fact that any piece of old commentary always includes Murray. He almost seemed sort of like he'd be permanent at the time, before his retirement, obviously, in 2001. That's well before I started picking up Formula One. But it's almost as if, I still maintain that Brundle is probably the best commentator still commentating for Formula One, and seeing the crossover period and sort of hearing the interplay between those two. I feel like Murray taught Brundle a lot of what he knew
about how to commentate. Maybe not consciously, because he just seemed to be so naturally good at it, but just in emulation, it's obviously not exactly the same because Murray's Murray, and there's no one who's going to get close to that. But the fact that it's the go-to voice that anyone picks when they go to sort of emulate F1 commentary, I think says a lot about how good he was.
Yeah, and I think obviously, the outpouring of love that we've seen today from the F1 community and just, sporting in general, like, shows just how much Murray, like, affected everyone and, got on with people and all of that. So in the words of the legend himself, let's go with our testing analysis. And the main question on everybody's minds, Louis, is our Mercedes in trouble?
I mean, it's only testing. I think that's something we need to sort of drill in sort of very early on. It's only testing. And while, yes, they had a gearbox issue which stunted their running on the first day, they completed, a decent amount of laps over the three days. I think even if you do sort of compare them to like the other 9 teams, I think they actually did complete the lowest, but still completing like over 300 laps in 3 days is pretty good going, considering they only technically had like 2.5 days worth of running. Yeah, there's that. But I mean, in general, it doesn't look like that Mercedes is, as on rails as we've seen in sort of previous years. I think back to sort of last year when we were looking at that W11 and, in testing, you could tell already, it was such a good car. It was so stable. Bottas and Hamilton could really get the most of it and, they were doing like hundreds of laps just in, one session. That's just how good that car was. Yeah, and it's something we haven't seen yet, but Mercedes are saying, oh, we're not as quick as the Red Bulls, but, we don't know fuel loads. We don't know this. We don't know that. We don't know engine modes. We're still very much in the dark. But while Mercedes may have had these issues, they are still very much the ones to beat.
I would certainly agree. And it was 304 laps that they completed across testing. So just over 300. Phil, a lot of people, we're used to seeing Mercedes sandbag in testing, because they don't want to give away that they've got a car that can break the supersonic speed barrier or whatever. Are you expecting Mercedes to be on the ball and, at the front of the pack in, Bahrain again in 2 weeks' time?
Yeah, as Louis said, I mean, it is testing. I think track conditions with all the wind and all the other sand and all the other crap that was going on, some of the great driving standards by a certain rookie, some of the other stuff that was going on. I think for Lewis, it looked like he had been out of the car for a couple of months and he was kind of rusty. Valtteri had moments. The car is it seems like it's got a lot of oversteer on the rear, but who knows? Maybe it's a tire. Maybe they're just sciencing things out. I think between now and 2 weeks from now, when we're talking about the post race of the Bahrain Grand Prix, we're going to be talking about Mercedes being up front because that's just what they've been doing for the last 6, 7, 8, however many years since 2014. And as long as Lewis has been there, he's generally been able to be competitive. So he's trying to get championship number 8. He's trying to get 100 wins. While the car may not seem like it's ready or in the right place right now, I think they will be in due time. But Red Bull definitely is going to be a factor with their strong driver pairing.
And speaking of Red Bull, Owain, Max Verstappen, one of the few drivers to have hit over 200 laps. Obviously, as Louis said, everything that we're saying obviously comes with the disclaimer that it's just testing. But are Red Bull potentially the dominant force going in forward to the start of the season after such a strong display in testing?
Yeah, they do look really rapid, and there were sort of small niggles of reliability with sort of, Charles Leclerc having that breakdown, of course, on the first day, and the Mercedes power unit the Mercedes gearboxes over 2 days having just little sort of teething trouble, it would seem like. But Honda just seemed to be, Honda power units, it seemed to be fairly powerful. They seem to have improved it over the winter, and in the back of the Red Bull, it's doing well. The only issues with Red Bull were, a small one with obviously seemed like a loose mounting or something like that on the engine cover. So that was quite spectacular. That brought out the red flag. But the fact that, you know, Perez is a more experienced driver, I think, than the previous previous three drivers that have been in the Red Bull up against Max. But it seems to be more planted at the rear. It seems like the new regulations with the floor haven't affected them so much. We think those affect affect lower rate cars more than they affect higher rate cars. They seem to be okay. They seem to have like a sort of quiet confidence. I think they're always going to be up near the front, but I think they're a little bit sort of slightly surprised at where they are.
The Red Bull, I think it's RB16B, getting off to a very strong start. And Louis, Owain touched on it. Sergio Perez obviously, seems to have adapted to that car very quickly, and he's just been consistent and quick during testing this weekend.
He's done remarkably well, I think. I think we saw last season and the season before that, both Pierre and Alex having trouble sort of just adapting to the car. I mean, I know the RB16 was a bit of a monster sort of last year pre-season, but the season before that, Pierre binned it. So at least he's doing a better job. And his times have been quick. The programs that he's running, he's been quite consistent. Yeah, of course, his lap times might not be as showy as Max, but it's not all about that. It's making sure that you're comfortable with this car. And yesterday when he got a full day's worth of running, he looked very planted and looked very solid in that car as well as he did today. So yeah, I think that is quite a positive from sort of Perez, because we've been wondering ever since his time at McLaren, can he hack it at a big team again? And I think he's going to be a really good asset to Red Bull. They've always been sort of kind of running one-legged for like last couple of seasons, and I think it's good that that Perez has managed to hit the ground running, and hopefully we'll see this turn into more positive results when the season starts in a couple of weeks' time.
Absolutely. It is a lot easier to challenge for the title if you have two cars in the title race rather than just the one and someone a bit further back. So, Phil, let's move on to McLaren. A very good weekend, I would say, for them. Very promising. Daniel Ricciardo seems to have gotten very comfortable in that McLaren very quickly. And it kind of looks as though, we might see a return to, some hot, like good form for McLaren.
That'd be the hope. I mean, they were definitely the third team last year with the Renault power unit. Now you have the Mercedes power unit. You have it's not like Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris were in a strong driver lineup, but I think at the end of the day, you can make an argument about Daniel Ricciardo's standing within Formula One, and he's a top 5 driver, even with the return of Fernando Alonso and, things like that. He's won races in cars that probably weren't the greatest. He's been able to compete in the Renault, and he's probably not been as fortunate. Many guys are in that realm where they don't get the fortune of being in that best car, putting themselves in position for it. But I think this McLaren, this team, the way things are going right now, the driver combination is going to be very strong. I think the car is, a step forward, of course, from last year. And I think Lando and him are going to push each other very hard. And similar to Red Bull and what Owain and Louis has said, the reality is it's a good combination. You need two drivers. And a lot of what happened last year is I think one driver would be doing good and the other car would fall out. Or I think it was like Carlos Sainz had tons of problems last year. If they can have two reliable cars, they're not only going to be number 3 in the constructors this year, they're going to give themselves a chance to be with the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull on a weekly basis.
So, Owain, me and you have been discussing this during the three testing sessions. How soon do you reckon this McLaren has a chance of winning? Because they certainly do look strong.
Yeah, I've put it money on being in Monaco because I'm an idiot apparently. But I genuinely think I don't think it's going to be too long. I think it'll be in the first half of the season, and I think all it takes is for Mercedes to have an off day, because they do often have them, and they might not be so strong this year. Red Bull do have obviously they're a very good team, but they do a very good team. They seem to be very good at, getting the pit stops right. Obviously, they've been great at that in the last few years, but they just sometimes they mess up and they have a really bad day. That's where I think McLaren could have the edge. Obviously, they're not available. They're not able to develop their car so much, and they've they've ruffled the feathers in the paddock with what looks to be a new gearbox that breaks some. Well, yeah, it is just inside legal. And I mean, those are the sorts of things that could be the edge and just get them a win. I mean, I don't want to say obviously they need to wait for a bad thing to happen. I think their testing performance, the fact that they were so consistent, didn't seem to have mechanical issues, and just did the run plan as they needed, and was really sort of going for the sort of nice to haves, the cherries on top of what they were doing. Means that they obviously seem strong. But yeah, I think it could be as soon as within the first 5 races.
It will certainly be good to see McLaren on the top step should they make it there in this season. So, Louis, on to one of the new, in inverted commas, teams for 2021. Driving in green, they're not a green Mercedes, but they're also not a green Racing Point car either. Aston Martin, do you think they're ready for the new season?
They definitely had a few issues hampering them. Of course, as we've already mentioned, they had the gearbox change on the second day, and they had to cut running short today due to some other issues that they were having. So, they're not probably in the best place that they could possibly be. I think they've definitely missed out on a lot of track time, and I think, they just had these problems here and there. It's just like small issues that just really hampered their track time. Like when Sebastian Vettel stalled at the end of the pit lane and basically just that was it. That was all of his running for that session. But I think it is a good package, and I think from what people have discussed and said, the Aston Martin is a good package. It's just whether or not how it can competes with the rest of his midfield when we've seen such dramatic change from McLaren, and it looks like it's paying off. AlphaTauri look quite punchy. Ferrari are definitely going to be a bit more punchier than they were last year. Alpine also look very solid. So it's they haven't had a great start, and they where they sort of line up compared to last season is very much up for question, because we were seeing last year, after testing we knew that Racing Point was a good car. This year I'm really not so sure.
Yeah, exactly. Last year as well, going straight out of the box and realizing that it is a pink Mercedes was quite a bit of a giveaway, which also might be as to why Sebastian Vettel decided to join Aston Martin in the first place. Obviously, he's joined a new team. It's the first time he's in Formula One that he's being powered by a Mercedes engine. He'll be very happy with that, I would imagine, after, Ferrari disappointing him, Red Bull eventually disappointing him.
Yeah, it's for Sebastian. After last year's nightmare, it's something for a guy who's a 4-time world champion, third most wins in the history of or second most wins in the history of the sport, to put himself in a place, possibly, who knows, to go up to the main Mercedes team if he wants to continue. Even then, I think there's Aston Martin with the hypercar deal. I think I think he's trying to angle towards later in his career, and I think he wants to do sports cars. So there's multiple options there. I do think they're, with some of the issues they've had, unlike Mercedes, it's kind of similar to what Sergio Perez had for a lot of last year, or Nico Hülkenberg, where they'd have one car that would kind of be all right, and then one car that would always have problems. And especially with how tight the midfield is going to be this year, whether you want to say Mercedes or McLaren is kind of moving out of it, or if they're still in it, with some of these other teams, as the guys have said, every point is going to count, and you can't be giving away points on mechanicals or just bad pit stops that's where can Seb get back to the form that he had for 4 world championships? Is Stroll capable of actually handling the pressure? I mean, we can make arguments that he really didn't do that most of the year, or most of any of time in his career. But so this is a lot more pressure, a lot more attention, manufacturer-based team now. Will they be able to respond? is a question. It may not be immediately, it may be a few months from now with some upgrades, but they're going to have to battle a lot of good teams and a lot of hungry drivers.
And even with questions about the performance of the Aston Martin, at least we know that every now and then there will be an Aston Martin leading the field at F1 Grand Prix this season, what with them being one of the safety cars for the season. So, Owain, let's move on to the other, in inverted commas, new team for this year, Alpine, taking over the Enstone outfit that was Renault. A lot of people have talked about how bulbous their airbox is, but really, should people be considering Alpine as a quiet threat to the top of the midfield?
I think they definitely should be. I don't even think it's a quiet threat. I think they look pretty fast. Alonso did a lot of laps. Ocon did a lot of laps. So they've put on sort of, I can't do the math here because I'm an idiot. They've put on sort of, it's getting on for, there we go, 396 laps. There we go. In total, that's a lot. Like that's a huge amount of mileage, given the running that they were able to have. Alonso jumped in the car and was Alonso, so he was really good. It was like he'd never really gone away. He's clearly spent his 2 years doing stuff, even with the preseason accident. And Ocon seemed to be good as well. Maybe not as quick as Alonso, but you might not expect that, bearing in mind he's not a 2-time world champion. I genuinely think that they could be troubling for podiums. As long as the reliability is good, they now have just them to focus on. They don't have sort of the requirements of McLaren to be dealing with, so they can design their power unit exactly as they want and have sort of some of the freedom that Red Bull found moving to Honda. I think it's sort of a fresh start, and it seems to be going well for them. Apparently the vibe is a bit different. They've kind of stripped it out and rebuilt it, and it seems to be going well.
Ocon being the first driver of the weekend to hit 100 laps. But Louis, as Owain touched on, they are now the sole recipient of their own engines, the Renault engine, and they've gotten rid of, what's his name? The team principal that should have got a tattoo.
Cyril Abiteboul,
that's his name. How do you see Alpine, lining up this season then, given, works team, works engine, new management system?
Yeah, I think I agree with Owain. I think that they're not a quiet threat. I think they're quite a loud threat, and a team that could really push on and do well. I think we've seen throughout this weekend, they've been up there on the time charts. They've been putting in significant amount of laps every day. Watching Fernando today, he was incredibly consistent in that Alpine. He was getting laps done. His long runs were going well. Same with Ocon, just out there pumping out laps, doing consistently good lap times. And really showing that this team, they got success last year, and they want to push on from that. They don't want to be stuck behind the line. So McLaren, and Aston Martin. Both of those teams have quite big ambitions to win the championship, and Alpine can be there. They've got Fernando Alonso in. It's I think for some people it's a fairly controversial decision to bring Fernando into the sport again, but he is a very good driver, and it's exactly what this team needed. Ocon hasn't been performing brilliantly, and having someone like Alonso by him is going to really help his career. And then also having Fernando just sort of wealth of experience, and sort of, he's been with that team before, twice. It's sort of that familiarity. I think it can do nothing but good for Alpine.
Yeah, you say Fernando could come in and help Ocon. The last time Fernando, had a very young but promising teammate, Stoffel van Dorn, he was annihilated, and he hasn't been in Formula One since. But you are right. If Ocon can learn from Alonso and not, buckle under the pressure of having him as a teammate, he's certainly going to benefit from that pairing. So, Phil, on to the most prestigious underperforming team, Ferrari. They were obviously underperforming last season, but they started to look as though they might have a handle on it towards the end. Leclerc and Sainz looked happy in the car at points, but they seem to still be a bit prone to a spin, and they are. It's still questionable as to where their performance is, I would say.
I was kind of hoping I'd get AlphaTauri, but instead we'll deal with the Scuderia with their green, whatever the heck that stupid paint scheme that they came up with. The fake sponsor that's green with two colors. I mean, that's just as bad as a car. But Charles Leclerc, will end up giving you whatever it has, good or bad. It seems like they're, based on what the reports are on on some website of the motorsport, they're saying like they've improved the power unit, so that's a positive considering it was basically the worst, and it's by no argument that it was the worst power unit. Will the car do what they need? You have a Charles Leclerc is very aggressive. You have Carlos Sainz, who has shown flashes. Can he perform in that second seat? I would venture to say he'll do better than Sebastian Vettel did last year, but what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things? They're going to have their hands full. I think they're kind of going to be with Aston Martin, and they're going to have to deal with Alpine, McLaren, and AlphaTauri in regards to those midfield points on a weekly basis.
Owain, we saw a very unusual case of some scrapping going on at the very end of testing today between Sainz and Raikkonen. I mean, last season, Ferrari and Alfa Romeo did share a lot of the same track space. Hopefully, we won't be seeing much more of that this season from Ferrari's perspective.
I mean, we hope not. But there's only so much you can do to improve a car, given the sort of the way the developments have gone this year. With obviously the sort of the costs involved and the token system. Yeah, mate, I think they're just kind of getting used to it, just seeing what it's going to be like. We sort of kind of cars shaping each other up on track. The Ferrari kind of it looks better. I think Sainz is handling it a lot better than Vettel was. The sort of way the car is, instability at the rear, just it seems to sort of want to. It seems lively and not in a really good way. Leclerc dealt with that quite well last year, and he'll, I assume, continue to do so. He maybe will sort of cut down on the sort of rookie mistakes he had. Ferrari have made improvements on the power unit. We've seen that they were top of the speed traps at times, which you can't look too much into, bearing in mind, obviously, how much fuel are they running? What's the power mode? What wing are they running? It's a test, so they're going to want to check. They're not just going to check what it's going to be like for Bahrain. It's not just a free practice session. But I think they've been allowed. They've made improvements on their power unit side. It just seems to be the chassis that's letting it a bit down. I'm not sure I see it really sort of fighting with the McLaren and the Honda, to be honest. No, sorry, not McLaren. Yeah, McLaren and the Alpine. Sorry.
It's okay. So, Louis, let's move on to AlphaTauri. They look very, very promising for an outfit that is effectively a B team. But just how good is that car? We saw Tsunoda topping the timesheets today a lot.
Yeah, but it did look like he was really ringing out that car, especially on those the softest C5 tire. So we don't know whether AlphaTauri were literally laying it bare and actually putting everything on the line, or there probably is still more to give from that car. But it did look very racy, and I think it has done for the last 3 days. And Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda have really got to grips with that car quite nicely. And like last year, the only thing that sort of really stopped AlphaTauri probably finishing ahead of Ferrari was just their inconsistency. One track they'd be absolutely brilliant, and the other tracks you'd wonder where they were. And when you've got someone in the car like Yuki Tsunoda, who will give you everything, every race, and really, go for it, and he has a lot of pace, as we've seen in junior formula. He has so much pace, and then you have someone like Pierre Gasly, who is currently riding a massive high after last season and how successful he was. I think it could be a really promising season. It just needs hopefully what we've seen from this testing can translate. And if they are consistent, then they could really show, what they're really capable of.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, Louis touched on this. Obviously, one of their weaknesses last season was the inconsistency of their performance, but certainly around the Bahrain track over the last 3 days, that car has looked consistent and also very compliant with both drivers' driving styles.
Yeah, they mentioned what do you call Pierre Gasly as the Bahrain specialist or whatever. Somewhere I heard it in one of the videos. So there is that. I think for Gasly, of course, now it's kind of like house money. After he won the Italian Grand Prix last year, the angle is not. He's not staying there. He's probably leaving. Where he's going to leave to is going to be one of the questions of the whatever silly season. But he's solid, strong leader of the team, and he has Yuki Tsunoda coming in there, very hungry. Honda is happy to have a Japanese driver. Of course, now it's not going to be a Honda after this year, but tons of potential. Going to be the rookie of the year without much effort, I would think. He's shown it, as we said. I mean, he's somebody I'm looking forward to seeing on a weekly basis in Formula One. I think there's just the sky's the limit for him, and he could definitely be. I mean, it may not be a very high bar theoretically when you consider the Japanese drivers of the past, but Sato was the one that kind of had a podium and in some other moments, but mostly everyone remembers him because he crashed a lot. And then the rest of them were pretty garbage. So the fact is, if Yuki Tsunoda can stick in the sport, it'll be great. And I think he seems like a good guy, so it'll be positive for Formula One in general.
Yeah, a lot of excitement around Yuki Tsunoda and the future of, AlphaTauri. So, Owain, let's move on to Alfa Romeo. 422 laps across testing. Raikkonen set 229 of those himself, and it felt like he set about 200 of them today. Actual figures may not be as correct, but anyway, yeah, are they still the lead Ferrari customer car?
Easily, yeah. The story, like Sauber knows what they're doing because it's still Sauber at heart. Raikkonen knows what he's doing. Gio's he's made some mistakes in the past, but he's a solid option. And the sort of pairing of those two is, as yielded 422 laps. They didn't have any major issues. They just pounded around. They just did what they needed to do. And they've got themselves to a point where I think they'll be sort of fighting with Williams. I don't think they're going to be especially quick, but they can steal some results if there's sort of crazy things happening. I know I say it a lot, but it's just one of those things. You've got to look out for them. And Raikkonen knows what he's doing. I don't think it's going to be as dire as it was last year, because again they're taking the new Ferrari power unit, which is more powerful. That's not going to be sort of 20 kilos worth of extra dead weight in some ways. It's going to be a lot better for them. So I think it'll be maybe a return to form is probably a good way to put it.
Agreed. And Louis, obviously Owain mentioned Raikkonen looking really well. Even Antonio Giovinazzi looked pretty good in his testing sessions, and obviously Alfa Romeo keeping that consistency of the driver pairing, which was very much under doubt for a long time. That's going to help them in the battle for not finishing last.
Yeah, it definitely is. As Owain said, I think I'd expected them to be battling with the Williams this year. Probably, and again, they'll probably be completely outclassing the Haas. I don't think Haas have got a very bright season ahead of them. But while Alfa Romeo did look solid, even Kimi topping the timesheets now and again, you're pumping these great laps. But of course, that means, very little. And, while we can say that the Alfa Romeo clearly is better and will be better than what we saw last season, everyone else is kind of moved on. So it kind of still keeps them in that bottom three. But as you said, having that consistency, they're up against Haas, two rookie drivers. It's going to be quite difficult. But, with Williams, they've got, they've also retained their two drivers from last year, and they've got well, we'll get on to them later. It does look like they have a better package than they did last year. So I think it could be definitely interesting. And I think what we probably will see from Alfa Romeo this year is that they're not going to be so drastically far from the points. And as Owain said, like if they can, grab a point or two, I think they're definitely in the correct position to be able to sort of take advantage of that.
So, Phil, Louis mentioned this. Haas have got 2 rookies, one of which this podcast doesn't name.
Yeah.
The other of which is a name which everyone always, wants us to talk about. But, they've spent none of their development tokens on their car, and they've said that they're focusing on the next year's car in terms of this year's development. Have they made a mistake and gone backwards, and will we see them at the back of the grid?
Yeah, I mean, did they make a mistake? I don't know about that because their car was pretty terrible last year as it is, and they've decided to make 2 rookies because now they're basically the junior Ferrari outfit now, not Alfa Romeo. For Mick's sake, it's going to be a learning year anyway, and it's going to be tough. They're not going to be really judging him per se. I mean, people will, but everyone says he's a second year kind of guy in his career over his junior Formula career. So we're going to probably watch them running in the back with the Williams and the Alfa Romeos. But I also think that Williams and Alfa are going to be ahead of them. The other guy can do whatever he wants. If he wanted to go and crash into a guardrail and catch on fire, it wouldn't be such a big deal to anybody else. But I feel bad for Mick that he has to drive that load. But I guess when you're getting paid by Ferrari, then it doesn't really matter what you have to drive, even if they're terrible cars. So we will see what happens. It's more about, I guess, learning and doing what he can so that 2022 is positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Owain has had a couple of issues during practice, that meant that some of their drivers didn't get as much time out on track as they would have liked. But something I noticed was that both of their drivers' lap times were very similar, suggesting that, they were getting the maximum performance that they could possibly get at the time.
Yeah, if we see similar lap times, like you say, it either means that they're extracting the maximum, which I think is probably closer to the truth than the second option, which is that they're just going for just hit these figures. We're just trying to hide stuff. We're just trying to test the car out. The car is broadly similar. It's a few changes here and there just to bring it back into legality. But it's last year's car with a new power unit in it. I'm glad for Mick in certain ways, in that he's going to get essentially a season of competitive test sessions. The less said about the other one, the better. He's going to be there, and I think that, bearing in mind the way the backing is it's one of those sort of pay driver situations. But yeah, Mick should hopefully hit the ground running if Haas deploy their day resources correctly, with sort of the way the budgets are now into 2022. Haas have already come out and said that they're going to focus on that. And as I say, a year of competitive test sessions at all the circuits that they're going to be, or vast majority of the circuits that they're going to be visiting the year after, could really build his confidence to actually really attack the next season.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really hurt George Russell's mentality driving at the back for 2 seasons with the occasional forward propulsion. And it will be interesting to see how long Haas get to drive a mobile Russian flag, but we'll find out when the investigation concludes. But yeah, so Louis, on to the last team on the grid. Williams had 3 drivers running all weekend, Nissany, Latifi, and then Russell, each having 1 day, but it looked positive. And for one, they brought upgrades to testing. 2 years ago, they didn't even have a car, It's looking good if you're a Williams employee.
Yeah, I think Williams have really turned the corner, and they're really really pushing on now, and I think that's quite very evident to see. This sort of new management is getting stuff done, and I think that's what we all wanted to see. Williams was just faltering sort of year after year until it really hit rock bottom in 2019 with that just absolutely dreadful car that rocks up to Australia 4 seconds off the pace. but you've seen the improvement over the last 2 seasons coming into this one. It is really good to see. You said about the 3 drivers, it's absolutely shambolic. I think while I've been praising Williams' management, having Nissany in the car for the first day was an absolutely shambolic decision from my view. I think I can't remember who it said. Someone in commentary said that they were speaking to Nicholas Latifi on day one, and he apparently he wasn't very impressed at all. He was like saying, "Well, all the drivers get 1.5 days, and I get one." And it's like, well, yeah, it's really stupid. I think, but from the running that Latifi did do on the second day, it was looking very positive, and from the running that we saw today from George again, was looking very positive. It's just Williams just trying to get as much done as possible over the 3 days, and just making sure that they set themselves up nicely for what hopefully will be a much better season this year, and hopefully we'll see them off the back row of the grid, and hopefully see mostly Latifi off the back row of the grid, and hopefully see George have a shot at a top 10 this year. He was so close last year that Williams, and I think he could really push on and get that in the Williams this year.
And Phil, there is definitely the potential for that Williams to have pace. It's got the Mercedes power engine, and it's got at least one good driver in the form of George Russell. So yeah, after a season of no points, obviously this season, how soon would we be expecting Williams to maybe get that first point in over a year?
That's a good question. I don't really know. It depends on where they're going to go. George, of course, has become Mr. Saturday. Whether it's a weather, he got close at Germany with the rain. Kubica got him there. I think this year with the kind of package they do have, it's possible some of the more Mickey Mouse type tracks like that's one thing I'm trying to say, like you go Catalunya or whatever, but it's like I think if they run the short oval or whatever at Bahrain, or if they're able to run some alternative circuits, I think that might play into Williams' hands with Doralton or whatever. That's really what it is. I can't say. I really don't know. But I will say that for the first time in a long time, at least Williams seems competitive, and that's a positive for the sport. And it's also a positive for George when he's trying to angle towards getting into the Mercedes proper, and possibly to be teammates with Lewis or whatever will end up happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. So after covering all the teams, Owain, who would you say had the best testing session in terms of the teams?
In terms of the teams, goodness, I think you have to go by lap count. Honestly, I don't think you can go by anything else. I think it's the best way of quantifying it, which means that we sort of we're left with AlphaTauri, and I think they've developed themselves a really reliable. Well, yeah, they've got a reliable car. Looks easy to drive. Their drivers seem to be able to get the most out of it, and they put a lot of laps on the board, and hopefully that's going to set them up with a lot of good data to carry on into the season.
Louis, same question.
I think my choice was really between AlphaTauri and McLaren, but I'm also going to go with AlphaTauri. I think, as Owain said, very solid 3 days, getting a lot of data, really showing, just how good that car would be. The sort of the changes that they've made from last year's car to this year's do look like they're working and they're paying off in terms of pace. And when you have 2 drivers that look so comfortable in the car, I think that's as far from a negative as you could possibly get in Formula One, and to be able to have that trust and to be able to sort of have those drivers have that confidence to be able to, push, I think it's really good. And I think they have set themselves up for what could be a very good season.
And Phil, again, same question.
Yeah, I'm going to go with McLaren. I think AlphaTauri definitely stands out, and with this new driver combination, I feel like it's going to be a very strong lineup. And I also feel that way with McLaren. Mentioned earlier, I think Ricciardo, you can't go wrong with him. He's always going to give you the absolute most. and you have Lando there, who's been showing signs for 2 years. And I think with the better power unit, theoretically, a stable platform to work with what the previous car was, I think McLaren is in a place where we could see them back to where they had been for so many decades before. And I think that's a positive sign in regards to not only the midfield or whatever, maybe possibly winning again, which something we wouldn't have thought a few years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, who would have thought of the dreadful black and orange McLaren potentially winning races in a couple of years? So I guess the other side of the coin is who had the worst of the testing in terms of the teams, and there's obviously probably two suggested teams here, Mercedes and Aston Martin. And whilst most people are probably going to go for Mercedes, I'm personally going for Aston Martin because, Mercedes, we've come to expect perfection. And as someone in one of the commentary teams ended up suggesting, when we don't get perfection from Mercedes, that's when we think, oh, Mercedes are having a terrible day, when really they could just be having a 7 out of 10 instead of a 10. So Aston Martin, obviously, they've used all their filming days. The next time they can be on track is the first practice session in Bahrain in 2 weeks' time. And I think that they really needed to hit the ground running and continue running this weekend. So, Owain, who's done worst in testing in your eyes?
I think I'm going to agree with you. Aston Martin, I think that they've got more laps on the board than Mercedes, so I'm going to sound like I'm abandoning my standard here. But the fact that Stroll had something like 80 more laps completed than Vettel for sort of 4 hours, it was about 4 hours that Vettel had out of the car, I think, total. Oh, no, sorry, it was 3 with the sort of gearbox change and various other things. But Mercedes managed to do a similar amount of laps across both drivers, and it's kind of weird to see that Vettel got so little time in the car. Obviously, he's a 4-time world champion. I don't think he's going to forget how to drive or anything like that. But I think they need laps on the board. They really do. This is sort of their really push away from being the sort of shoestring budget team that they needed to be, hyper efficient and things like that, and they really need to. They're a works team essentially now, with the Mercedes engine in the back, and they need to be good. They really, really need to be good, and I don't see enough potential for them to capitalize on, unfortunately, right now.
Louis?
Yeah, I'm not going to buck the trend here. Yeah, I'm also going to go with Aston Martin. I was looking something to blow me away. I was really hoping that we'd see this team really hit the ground. They showed their intent. Their launch. We want to be world champions in 5 years, and honestly, I saw nothing of the sort really. The constant sort of problems. The electrical faults which saw them go out late. The gearbox issues, whatever issue they had that stopped Vettel's running today. They've had an issue every single day, and it's just not where they need to be. And they really needed to get laps on the board. And any time that they didn't have issues, I felt like they weren't getting the laps done. And I think there probably are a few programs that they probably wanted to run which they haven't. So I think they're going to be really still learning about the car come sort of free practice 1 in 2 weeks' time.
And last but by no means least, Phil, who is your lowest of testing?
See, I wanted to go with Mercedes, but I couldn't come up with anything, even though Owain and Louis were able to go first. And I was going to try to do it to be different. I don't believe it because I said it earlier. They're Mercedes. Aston Martin, Stroll, F1, Racing Point, whatever you want to call them. They used to be Jordan, whatever. It's just the same way as Alpine and the 18 different things they've been over time. Whatever you want to call it, they're still kind of the same team, and they employ Lance Stroll. So it's kind of a deal where you would want to believe that they're going to make that step forward, and Lawrence Stroll's is like multi-billionaire, but they're still mid-range, and it's not a good thing. We could go and justify it as testing, but if they show up on track 2 weeks from now and they're having the same problems, that means they're going to get 0 points, and that means they're going to have a real battle on their hands to really be able to compete against a midfield that has definitely improved. Multiple teams have taken a step forward in a year where there hasn't been that many changes. So it's something to be said there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that brings up to, a conclusion of testing. Thank you very much to everyone that's been watching and listening, particularly on the Facebook live stream. We are newly available on Verbal, as well as Amazon Music, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studios, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and race results. We are on Reddit. Just search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk. And we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. We'll be back as soon as the 2021 season gets underway. Thank you very much to my panelists for joining me.
No worries.
No worries. Thank you.
And
Yep.
thank you for listening, and goodbye.